This video is sponsored by A&M ACT. This past June test, ACT did something that is not normally done, and that's mixed logs and functions. So today we're actually going to talk about how to solve 59. But before we start that one, we need to do a couple of things. First off, we need to talk about rules of logs. So let's take a look at 54. It says here, what is the solution for this equation? And what we want to make sure we understand is that this a here, the base, is to the power of y, so that would be like 2 to the power of 1. So we would then have 2 to the power of 1 would equal this square root of 3x plus 4 all over x minus 2. This is huge because now we have a problem that we can solve. We can cross multiply or whatever you want to do, multiply both sides by this. We would then have 2. We would have x minus 2 equals, and then this would be 3x plus 4. We do want to, to do this 2x, or 2, sorry, that's supposed to be 2x minus 4 equals, and then we're going to square both sides. So we would end up squaring this. So it could be very, very time consuming. And that is what ACT is expecting. It's a 53. It should be pretty time consuming. The only thing I would suggest in kind of thinking about it is I do want this answer right here to equal 2. Okay, so when I get all said and done, I want it to equal 2. And I want to use my answers when I do this. So I don't necessarily want to go through all of that because then I'm dealing with quadratics and I'm having to move things around and then do a lot of work. I want to first eliminate some of my answers. So the first thing I'm going to eliminate is C. The reason is if I put a 2 in here, I have 2 minus 2, and that's going to give me a 0 in my denominator. Not allowed to have those, so it can't be C. Now, if I put a 0 in these, okay, let's take a look at what happens. And I like to use the easy ones first. So that would make the 3x disappear, and I just have 4. And then I have negative 2. Okay, so when I do this, I would end up with a square root of 4 is 2. And negative 2 over that is negative 1. So we're getting closer to it. It's not 0. But we're not that far off, and we're trying to find a number that would go under here that would give me a perfect square. Remember, if I'm going to get a perfect number, I have to have a perfect square. So the easiest thing to do is to kind of say, okay, what can I put in here that will give me a perfect square? And let's take a look. If I put a 4 in here, I end up with 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I end up with a perfect square, right? So I would end up with 16, which would give me 4. That's pretty good. And if I put a 4 over here, I'm going to divide both sides by 2. I end up with 2. Hey, look, there's my answer. So sometimes logs, as long as you remember the rules of them, are very helpful to do. And knowing that you just want it to equal 2 to the first power, which is just 2, also helps. So that was one thing that you should know about your logs, because ACT does like this rule right here. Pretty popular. Well, now that we've done the logs, let's take a look at what type of question they're asking for the actual function. And it's asking us to basically, because one of the things is going to be this inverse. And I want to make sure you realize the inverse just means that the x and the y are switching places. So we're going to change this to y equals x squared plus 4. It's easier to see. We're going to switch the x and the y, so we have x equals y squared plus 4. We're then going to move everything to the other side of the equation and solve for y. So we would subtract 4, so we'd have x minus 4 equals y squared, and then we would just square root both sides. So that's all that means, okay? So when you see this symbol right here, don't freak out. It just means you're going to change this to y and then switch its places and solve for y, okay? So let's take a look at what happens when we have this one. This is the mixture of the two. We have the logs, which, as I said a minute ago, is if I had log a of x equals y, I would have a to the y power equals x. So we want to use that right there and realize that because all of these are in log forms. So what does that, so I want to go from this to this, all right? So my base is going to be log 5, right? It is the inverse, so keep that in mind. This is now y, and this is now x. Okay, I want to make sure you realize when we get the inverse, we still want to switch our x's and y's. So we would still want to write that as y equals 5x over 2 to the power of x over 2, and then it becomes, since it's the inverse, it becomes x equals 5y divided by 2. All right, so we have our log, our 5. We're kind of looking at our answers. We are going to have an x, but remember, the square is on the other side, okay? So that means that we have this y divided by 2, okay? And you got to think about it. So we're going to multiply both sides by 2. It's the easiest way to get rid of it. All right, and that's where we ended up with this right here, and that is our answer. So you kind of think of it that way. It is in the power at this point, but since we're putting it in the log, we can then just, since we're solving for y, we're just going to move that to that side. So now we have, this is what f of x equals. So now that I'm hoping to explain to you that when you take the logs and functions, this is very rare for ACT to put the two of them together, but when they do, you need to make sure you understand what all of this means. So give me a thumbs up if you like these type videos, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of them. You have a great day and hope to see you next time. At A&M ACT Prep, we offer small classes. Visit our website, amactprep.wordpress.com, for more information and to register for our upcoming classes.